Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Autumn Lakeside with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over colors and brushes and materials that we'll be using for this painting. For the colors, primary yellow, titanium white, cadmium red medium hue, raw sienna, cerulean blue, Mars black, and Hooker's Green Hue permanent. So you can actually, if you want to simplify the color palette, you can mix the blue and yellow together to make the green if you want to do it that way. Otherwise, 7 colors for this. As far as the brushes, I'll be using 4 different brushes: the 3/4 flat brush, the number 12 bright brush, the number 4 round, and the number 8 long round. The 3 red brushes actually come together in a pack. Those are called Princeton Velvet Touch. The black one is a Royal and Majestic brush. We'll be using ruler, pencil, chalk for some basic drawing aspects. And let's go ahead and get started. So this is a landscape painting, and I have my canvas in the vertical mode. The horizon line for this landscape painting is really simple, right down the center of the canvas. So whatever size canvas you're using, all you need to do is locate the center and draw a very light horizontal line across the canvas. So that divides your canvas in half. And we are going to paint the sky first. On my paint palette, I have cerulean blue and titanium white. Let's load our 3/4 flat in just the blue, and let's paint this at the top, horizontal marks or horizontal paint strokes all the way across. Let's go down about an inch and grab the white. We're going to blend this white up into the blue. So grab white on your paintbrush without rinsing, bring it below the blue, and then brush it up into the blue, and it will blend with the blue. We are going to blend this all the way up into the blue. So we want the sky to be a little darker at the top and get gradually lighter towards the bottom. So as I go to the bottom, I'm just going to keep grabbing white and letting that blend. It doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. We can have streaks of darker color lower in the sky and streaks of lighter in the top, but for the most part, it should just be slightly darker at the top and lighter towards the bottom. So I'm just going to keep brushing left and right paint strokes. It's a very light blue sky, so don't be afraid to make it very, very light. In fact, if it was too dark, it wouldn't give us enough contrast later on in the painting. So keep grabbing that white, blending it. There's still enough blue on my brush to make that white turn into a very light blue. However, if you're adding this white and it just looks white as you're painting it, you can add little bits of blue to your brush as well. You can even go back and add more of the cerulean blue at the top if you want it to be a little bit darker at the top. So I'm going to get some more white on my palette. I'm going to continue to paint left and right paint strokes, and I'm going to go all the way to that horizon line and stop. So get more white. Down here it should turn very light. I've not added any more blue to my brush at this point. I'm just adding white. Go all the way to your horizon line, and don't paint below that line. So right now, before this dries, I'm actually going to add more cerulean blue to my brush and go back up at the top and paint more of this blue and blend that down into the middle part of the sky, just so the top part is still slightly darker. And that's it for the sky. We're going to paint the water, and the water is going to be the exact same colors, the blue and the white. But before I do the water, I'm going to find the center of this. So no matter what size canvas you're working on, you're going to find the center of this. So this would be 3.5 because the middle was 7 inches. So I'm going to mark 3.5, or whatever your center is in this bottom area. And I'm going to do another horizontal line. So everything in that area below the sky is going to be our lake. So I'm going to grab my Cerulean Blue and I'm going to pretty much just repeat this. I'm going to start out dark and I am going to go lighter. So I'm using the end of my paintbrush here to cut in on that horizon line. That should be significantly darker than the bottom of the sky. So lots of contrast right there. And then I'm going to bring this down a little bit further than I did with the sky. So instead of bringing it down like an inch, I'm going to bring it down almost a little bit more than halfway down that lake area. And then grab my white and start blending that up. So our lake is kind of a little darker than the sky, more of that darker blue. So get some more white on my palette. So the bottom of the lake, we're going to do lighter. I'm going to grab that white and blend that up into the water so that my lake is light on the bottom and dark at the top. I'm going to stop at that line and not go anywhere below that line. Bring this up and blend it. Get some more white on my brush. Blend that in. We'll add a little bit more white layering over this, but I'm going to let that dry a bit and load my palette with the color Raw Sienna next. And the ground area is going to be painted, or at least our first layer is going to be painted with Raw Sienna. So I'm going to rinse the brush, dry that brush off, grab my Raw Sienna, and everything here is going to be painted this light brown color. So same thing, left and right strokes. It doesn't matter if you start at the top or the bottom. It's all going to be the same color, and we're not blending anything for this one, just solid. When I get up to this area where it touches the water, I want to kind of go slow and make sure it cuts in that line. And you know what? It doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line. Just because this is a land area, it could be a little bit bumpy, a little wavy, because the land does not have to be perfectly flat and even. It could even overlap that blue a little bit, but don't overlap it too much to where it starts blending together. And fill all of that. And by now, all of your canvas is filled up solid. If you want, you can take your colors and extend them on the sides of the canvas if you're working on a stretched canvas. I'm going to add some more lighter layers on the lake. And I'm going to rinse my brush off and I'm going to get titanium white. And so my lake is not dry all the way. It's still a little bit wet, and that's okay. I'm going to allow some of that blue to still blend. But if yours is dry all the way, you can still do this step. Just don't add as much white to it. Just a very, very thin layer of white would be all that is needed. So I'm going to rinse the brush, grab my titanium white, start on the bottom of the lake. I'm just going to brush this kind of in the center area of the lake, kind of give it that glow just in the middle, and kind of see how it's kind of just blending with that blue a little bit more. I don't want to overpower it. I don't want it to match the same light color as the sky. I still want the lake to be, for the most part, darker. But adding this white in the middle just helps to create more of that reflection from the sky into the lake. Gives it some water texture. And if you don't like how that looks, you can actually just keep the lake the way it was. Blend a little bit more in the middle. Try not to let it overpower that dark blue. Blend it out. just in the middle area. So I kind of left the far left and the far right alone. Next, we're going to paint that little greenish land area that's behind our lake, overlapping the sky, and it's going to sit right on that horizon line. And we need the color Hooker's Green Hue and Mars Black on our paint palette. And we'll be using the number 12 bright brush. So this little flat brush, it's about a 1/2 inch wide. And I'm going to grab green, a little bit of black on the corner, mix those two colors together. That makes a really dark green. We're going to start out dark. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to use the end of my bristles to outline right above the horizon line, kind of wiggling my hand a little bit because that line doesn't have to be perfectly straight or uneven, just an area of land above the lake. And I'm going to load that in the same color. I'm going to start building hills above this, but these aren't going very high, just very kind of low-lying hills. Still using tip of my brush, kind of wiggling my hand to create different heights for those hills. Then load your brush in just the green and not the dark green, and go back and just kind of dab the brush to create more kind of texture in this land. Maybe these are trees that are far away, so we have a little bit of tree texture. I'm just kind of dabbing, stippling the end of my bristles to create this texture. There's a lot of variation in heights. It's still very, very low, but some parts go up a little bit higher, some dip down lower. I'm going to wipe the brush off, but don't rinse. Sometimes I'll use paper plate or my palette to wipe the brush, or you can use paper towel. And I'm going to load primary yellow onto my paint palette. So I wanted that green still on my brush, but not too much. So I'm taking my yellow, kind of mixing it with the green. So it's kind of a light yellow-green color. And at the very top of what I just painted, I'm adding this light yellow-green color because the top part of this tree hilly area is going to be lighter and the bottom part darker. And we already have the dark part at the very, very bottom. We even grab some white without rinsing. Go back. We don't want to make this look like there's snow on this, but a little bit of white adds a bunch of brightness to that greenish yellow. And we can just kind of dab it and blend it in. So it's very bright at the top and very dark and shadowy on the bottom. Next, I'm going to start the grass texture that is on the brown part of the land, and this is going to overlap our lake a little bit. So this is going to be our first layer, and it's going to be done with the raw sienna color. So we can use either the 12 bright brush for this or a number 4 round brush. So maybe you try it and you decide one of the brushes just feels better than the other. I'm going to start with the 12 bright brush, and I'll end up using the 4 round brush instead. But so we're going to load our brush into raw sienna, and I just want to kind of create these little grass blade strokes. I'm going to do this on both sides, and it's actually going to go all the way across. But these little grass blades overlap the water. So they go on the land and then they overlap the water. So I'm going to switch to the 4 round and show you how to do it with that, which I find it easier to do with the round brush. I feel like you have more control over the brush this way. I'm just dragging a little bit of water into the paint helps, but just dragging the little grass blades up. And my grass is actually a little bit longer on the left and the right, and it's going to dip down shorter in the middle. That's because I know I want to add a path in this painting, and so the path just kind of goes off and down to the lake, so I don't want my grass to be super long, kind of where that path is going to be. So that right here, a little bit off center to the left. Same technique, but these ones are a lot shorter. And the rest of them, on the left and the right of where you want your path to be, those can be longer. I recommend waiting for everything to dry until the next step, because the next step involves us painting the trunks of the trees. So I'm gonna rinse the brush off, let my painting dry, and then we'll be doing trees. So if you feel confident to just hand paint these trees in, you can. If you want, you can draw them out with a piece of chalk until you like the placement of them. So whatever you decide, I'm going to actually paint them without drawing them. And I'm going to use the 8 long round brush, and we need the color Mars Black on our paint palette. So I'm going to load this brush in water and actually utilize that water to kind of thin my black down. If you're using craft black paint, likely you don't need to thin it down, but the Liquitex Basics usually is kind of thick. So adding a little bit of water in there just kind of helps smooth things better when we paint. And I'm going to roll my brush. Especially for painting trees and branches, I find it important to roll your brush, because then you get your bristles already in a point and you can really get in there and do detail work with this 8 long round brush. I love the point on this brush because I can do thick paint strokes and thin paint strokes depending on how I apply the pressure. So right now I am doing thin paint strokes, and I'm drawing like a little triangular trumpeted shape. So that's the bottom of the tree trunk. And then we're going to go up. So the tree trunk, the vertical part, it could be a little bit wavy. I'm going to fill this triangular part in, make it a little bit thicker. This part goes up above the horizon line, and then it starts to turn into a long branch. So I'm going to bend this way. So there's my first branch. I'm going to start in the end and brush this way. So when you start at the end, you can press lightly using just the tip of the bristles, and then press down and you're putting more pressure on the bristles. So that's how you get your branch to go from thick where it starts and connects and then goes thin to a point on the end of the branch. It really is all about practice and brush control. I'm going to do another one. Start out thin, brush down, and press firmer with the brush. And then I'll do one right here. Thin, light pressure on the bristles. Press firm when you get to the base. And you're just adding. I'm going to make that trunk a little bit thicker. A little bit more water into my paint to help with the flow of the paint. And so we have some smaller branches in here. We can use mostly the tip of the brush to create the smaller branches. Very thin, and press firmer. If you're making the brush strokes and you notice that it's dry and not a flowing continuous paint stroke, try adding a little bit more water to it. It might mean that the paint is too thick. And then I'm going to do a second tree to the right of it. So there's only like an inch of space between these two trees. They're almost identical. So I'm going to do another. You start with a little triangle, and it goes up. This one's actually going to be slightly thinner than the one that I painted on the left. So this goes up, and then we turn this into our first branch, and then we branch it off into several smaller branches. And then it could get messy very fast with these branches kind of intertwined with each other. So I'm not going to do as many overlapping branches. I'm going to kind of just make it more branchier to the right, where it kind of maybe curves over, bends over to the right a little bit. And it's slightly taller than the other one. Right here, I'm only using just the end of the bristles to create those thin lines. And maybe there's another little baby tree, part of the same root system down here, that's kind of coming up and branching out. We can add some fun pops of fall color over here. The tree on the right is an aspen tree, and that trunk base needs to be white. So I'm going to rinse my brush off. I'm still going to use this brush for it, but I'm going to do pretty much the same technique, but with white instead. So I'm going to load some fresh titanium white on my palette, or use the white that's already there. And see, we're going to get some more white. So the base of this tree actually starts a little bit lower than the ones on the left. It's like maybe about 3/4 inches to an inch lower, pretty much in the center of that land area. And aspen trees are more kind of rectangular, so I'm not going to have it flute out as much on the bottom, so it's not necessarily a triangle it starts with. It kind of starts as a rectangle at the bottom, but it does go slightly thinner as it goes up. And I'm still doing that thing where I'm just adding little bits of water in there to make sure that white is nice and flowy and easier to work with. I'm not running out of paint very fast as I'm doing these paint strokes, and it's really the same technique. It's the tree branch that goes up, it goes way high in the sky, and then branches out. So these have branches that kind of go very upright, very similar to the trees on the left. And we'll be adding black branches on here too. Can go back and make the trunk a little bit wavy on the edge so it doesn't have to be exactly rectangular. And then I'm going to add some darker branches into the aspen tree. So I'm going to load this into black without rinsing, and it's actually going to make kind of a dark gray color. And then these are going to be very thin branches that are kind of just going off the main white branches. And I'm only using the very end of my bristles to do this. These very thin lines, holding that brush very lightly to create that. And let's see, we'll just have a few going off this way. The branches are going very much upright and they're not creating a huge canopy. And they go pretty much all the way to the top edge of the canvas. I am going to do the next layer for the land next and establish where we're going to have this path. So I'm going to use the number 12 bright brush and the color Hooker's Green Hue. So I'm going to take my green, I'm going to add just a teeny bit of black to it to make it dark green, kind of like what we used earlier for that green in the background. And then before I start, I'm actually going to use my piece of chalk here to sketch out where I want this path, because this next green layer I'm painting, I don't want to paint on the path. So I'm using my chalk to sketch very loose left and right drawing strokes. And this chalk will not be visible in the end. We're going to see how it gets wider towards the bottom, and it kind of curves a little bit and then goes this way, and then it gets very wide at the bottom left corner. And see right here, it just gets very narrow in the back because that creates distance in our landscape painting. So now that we have our sketch sort of filled in with the chalk, or loosely filled in with the chalk, then I'm going to get my little flat brush again and the green that I just mixed. And I'm going to start just kind of filling the land in. I'm doing these very loose, kind of left and right, dabby sort of paint strokes. I'm going to go around the path. So I'm not adding any of this green over where I did the chalk. And I'm not trying to cover all of the brown. I'm trying to just leave a lot of gaps still showing through. So it's not like we're painting it in solid green. We're doing a lot of open spaces too. Little dash marks on the left as well, going around the path. And you want to go around your tree trunks as well. So you're just going to continue to fill this in, and you might know you might notice some variations in the green, because when you go to reload your brush, you can grab your dark green that you mix, so that's that black and green, but you can also go back and grab pure green too and just have that kind of add to the variation of green in this layer that we're doing. And again, we don't want to cover all of that first brown layer. We still want some gaps showing through. I'm going to mix a yellow green on my palette next. I'm going to take this color that I was just using, that dark green that I was just using, and I'm adding primary yellow to that. So mix about equal parts primary yellow into that, or maybe a little bit more if it's not showing up light for you. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to add this mostly in the back. It's a little bit darker and shadowy on the bottom, or a little bit more darker and shadowy on the bottom, and a little bit lighter in the back. So that's why I'm taking this yellow green and adding it back here so it's lighter. So you're going over what you just painted, but still leaving gaps. There's still some of that initial brown showing through, and that's what we want. We can add a few kind of down in the lower areas, but for the most part, the lower part is slightly darker. I'm going to switch back to my number 4 round brush next and go do another grass layer over the brown layer that I did earlier. So I'm going to take my yellow-green color, add a little bit of water into that to kind of loosen it, a little bit more yellow because I do want this to show up brighter, and actually add a little bit of white into it. So when you add the white into it, that really brightens that green up. So back here, over my brown grass, using the very end tip of the brush and just dragging little grass blade strokes upwards with that green, and it overlaps the water just like what we did earlier, but we're not covering all that brown. This is just another layer of this light green grass. And again, when you get to the path area, barely added anything in that area. We don't want long grass there because it's assumed that the path just kind of goes down towards the lake. And then a few more grass blades, maybe on the side, lower in this. So I don't want to fill this entire area with grass. I'm only going to go down a little bit with the grass blades and then just keep that horizontal paint texture we added earlier, and it's assumed that that's grass or something, moss. But if you want to go in and add grass everywhere you can, keep in mind we're going to add leaves, like fall leaves on the ground, so that's going to cover a lot of that grass texture anyway, so that's why I'm not going to do that. We are going to work on the path next. As pretty as it looks, that chalk's not going to stay there. We're going to actually paint over our chalk lines. So if you want, you can go ahead and get a wet paintbrush and erase all your chalk lines, but I'm going to leave it because my paint's going to erase it as I go. But if you think it's in the way, you can erase all of it. So let's take our raw sienna and white, equal amounts of raw sienna and white. Take that and start in the back of the path and do the same type of little horizontal paint strokes. Leave little gaps between all your strokes. And when you get down to about a quarter of the way, grab more of that raw sienna. We want our path to be slightly darker towards the bottom and lighter in the back. So I'm doing the same type of strokes. This color is way too similar to that first layer, so if it's not really showing up, you can add a little bit more white to it actually. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and add just a little bit more of that lighter color in there. And then do more little horizontal strokes to fill the whole path up. Without rinsing the brush, grab a teeny tiny bit of black. And I'm going to go in and just very lightly add some black onto the path. Little tiny horizontal marks. These little marks get smaller in the distance because our path gets smaller in the distance. And then without rinsing the brush. I still have that black on my brush, by the way. I'm going to grab the raw sienna again. So I have black mixed with raw sienna. It's a little bit kind of a darker brown. I'm just going back in there and just adding more layers of little horizontal marks on the path. Kind of create some shadows and then smaller marks in the distance. Next, we're going to work on the details of the aspen tree. So I'm going to rinse my Foreground brush and make a gray. I'm going to still use this brush and make a gray on my paint palette. So we're going to take black and white and mix those two colors together. So here's my titanium white, a little bit of black to make a medium gray. So a little bit more white than black for this color. Take this and kind of sketch an outline on the right side of all the main branches. So all the big main branches, just get this very kind of light sketched line outline on the right. Gives it kind of this shadowing that's happening on the right side of the tree. And then kind of drag some of this gray inwards, but we're going to quickly switch to pure black here. So I just did a few little kind of marks, especially on this branch. It's kind of going diagonal. Gives it that like three-dimensional look. And then grab your black and you're going to do these little black markings on the right side of your tree branches. And they don't all have to be on the right. You can do some that are right in the middle. You're doing this mostly on the main branches, all the white branches that you painted. Little black horizontal markings to give it that classic aspen tree bark look. You could do like, some of them are just so small, they're like little dots that you're painting, and some of them, they're more like horizontal lines. Maybe some on the larger part of the trunk become larger. I've grabbed more gray right there and just did a few kind of gray markings in there just for some variation. And now I'm taking more of the white on my brush and I'm just going to extend a few of these branches, this one up a little bit more. Just a few more white colored branches. And we'll call this aspen tree good. I am going to add the detail in our dark tree branches. And this one, I'm just going to take my raw sienna and add white to it. And I'm going to use this color to highlight the right side of the tree, both of the tree trunks. So I'm just lightly brushing this on, not with the intention to cover all of that dark. We want a lot of that dark to still be there for shadowing. So I am applying this very, very lightly. You can even add black into that color to make it more of like a middle color. You can take some white and do white just along the far, far edge of that tree. So if you're highlighting the branches and you end up adding too much light color, you can always go back with black and darken your branches to make them shadowy. You just need to add the light color on the right side of the main parts of the branches. So I'm not doing all the little tiny branches with highlights. That would take a long time to do, and a lot of that's going to be covered with the leaves anyway. Next, I am going to do my first layering for the fall leaves, and we need the color Cadmium Red Medium Hue on our paint palette. And I'm going to do the tree on the left first. I'm actually going to make this into more of an orange color, so I need primary yellow. And take our Foreground brush, mix equal parts red and yellow together. And let's start with that. So these are just little dots of paint, and I'm kind of being messy with this to make it look like their leaves are not rounded. They're more of like the the maple leaf style leaf, although we're not painting that in that much detail. So I am just dabbing my brush with very messy orange paint strokes. And we're just creating a big cluster, kind of creating a column above these branches. And we'll be layering kind of darker and lighter colors above this as well. So it kind of creates a triangular area. Let's add a little bit more red to that and go back and do another layer. And then let's add some white to that and go back and add the lighter layer kind of on the edges on the top of that. I'm going to let this tree dry before I do the tree next to it because those are going to have leaves that are overlapping what I just painted, and that's going to get really messy fast if I don't let that dry. So I'm going to do the aspen tree, and these are my favorite trees, by the way. They have rounded leaves, or they're going to appear to be visually rounded. So that means, and they're yellow, we're going to take our primary yellow, and when we do these kind of little paint marks, these are going to be like more like little dots, and not messy dots that we just did, but actual uniform rounded dots. So I'm taking thick layers of paint, adding that on the end of my bristles, and just when I'm making the little marks, I'm just marking like a little circle. I'm doing this in bundles just on the ends of all of the branches. Next, I'm going to layer on brighter color leaves. So I'm going to take titanium white and take that yellow that's still on my brush, but add white to this and do the same thing. And this is going to show up as very light colored rounded leaves. So imagine aspen trees when they blow, they make that quaking color variation where some of them kind of shimmer. So that's the effect that we're trying to create by doing these white circles, or it's actually white mixed with yellow, but same thing, thick rounded paint strokes in bunches all over the tree on the ends of all the branches. So you can even overlap parts of the main trunk as well. Next, let's go back to our tree over here on the left. I'm actually going to take my red and orange color and let's mix a little bit of brown into it just for fun. I'm going to do this little tree down here. The tree on the left actually isn't dry all the way, so I'm going to do this first. But it's the same technique as the tree on the left, messy dots. They're not rounded and uniform like the aspen tree. And this one's going to show up a little bit darker just because I'm using that red but mixed it with a little bit of brown. And actually what I'm deciding to do is I'm going to take that color and add yellow into it and maybe some white. I want to do some more layering on the tree on the left, specifically like around the top part, just adding this lighter color towards the top and maybe some in the middle too. Adding that lighter color over our dark color gives the fall leaves a little bit more dimension so it doesn't look as flat. And so that's going to have to dry a little bit more before we can work on the tree on the right. You can also just leave that middle tree bare with no leaves. And let's go and detail some more things in the ground area. So what I like to do to my tree trunks is I like to add shadowing and overlapping grass so it looks like the trees are there and not necessarily floating on the land. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking black mixed with green and doing very loose left and right strokes below the tree trunks to create just a little bit of shadowing. I'm not going to go into advanced shadowing for this one. Rinse your brush and let's get our kind of a medium to light green. So take your green, add a little bit of white to it, and then let's make these little grass blades that are kind of sticking up. They can overlap the front of the trunk and that really makes it look like the trees are not floating. But I like to do just a few grass pieces to the left and the right, a little bit on the bottom, and you can do that to each of your trees. And then while I have this lighter green with me, I'm going to go back and do more of these little horizontal marks on the ground towards the back. We're going to add some orange coloring on the path next. So I'm taking my orange color, adding a little bit of white to it, and doing little marks. This is optional, but it does add some more color variation and depth on the path. And we're going to start doing the leaves on the ground, starting with the yellow. So I didn't rinse my brush off. I had orange on it already, and now I'm just loading the yellow. So I am doing little circles on the ground. So these are just like what we did in the aspen tree, but these are leaves that have fallen on the ground, and just make little bundles of leaves kind of scattered everywhere. So imagine the leaves would be piling up in some areas, and there might be some areas where there's no yellow leaves at all. I'm going to grab a little bit of that white color, so white and yellow, for some color variation in the leaves on the ground. Now I'm going to rinse and do the red. So this is the Cad Red Medium color. And same thing, but I'm going to start this on the left side, even though there's going to be plenty of red leaves on the right too. So I can do some right leaves, and we could do yellow on the left side too. You didn't have to have the yellow just on around the aspen. So same thing with these leaves, might be a little bit bigger and not as rounded. Some of the ones that are further away might be smaller, and then you can create depth by making bigger leaves closer to the bottom of the painting. And I'm going to get some more raw sienna, and I'm going to mix raw sienna and black together. Add a little bit of shadowing to my path. So just on the bottom, I'm doing these kind of loose left and right paint strokes to add more layering on the path. I'm going to go back with white, kind of do the same thing, more layers of color with the white. Now I'm going to go back and add leaves that are on the path. So I'm going to rinse this, grab my red, and do little red dots kind of scattered. There's not a lot of leaves on the path because I don't want it to hide, but just a few I'm sure would be on the path. And we can do yellow as well, little yellow dots. If that doesn't show up, you can add white into your yellow to ensure that that's going to show up. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to add white to my palette, mix yellow and white together, and this will show up really bright. The ones that are further away are going to be smaller, and the ones that are closer to the bottom of the canvas, those are going to be bigger marks. Now I'm going to make some orange. So I'm going to take my yellow and red, mix that together. And if you want more of a vibrant orange, then you add more yellow than red, versus if you did the same amount of red and yellow, it would be more like a reddish orange. So I'm going to do orange, little dots kind of all throughout. And now that this tree should be dry by now, I'm going to do the tree on the right, and this one's going to be a darker red. So I'm going to take my Cad Red Medium Hue. I'm going to add a tiny bit of black to it, just a tiny bit, just to darken and deepen that red. So it's more like a crimson red color. And so this is going to be dark, very, very dark red, very pretty. The point is to just to have, because these trees are right next to each other, just to have it stand out from the other tree. So I'm doing the exact same technique, overlapping that orange tree. So these are going to kind of go up in a column and cover all of the smaller branches up here. You can decide to leave a lot of blue from the sky showing through, so maybe you don't want as many leaves, or you can fill it up. And so up here, I'm doing a whole bunch. So when I reload my brush, I'm kind of altering between just loading it in the bright red that's not mixed with black, and then loading it with the red that is mixed with black, so I get some color variation as I'm adding these leaves. So I'm going to continue to create little bunches of dots to fill that tree, and then you can keep going as much as you want or as little as you want. Going to add some darker shadowy colors in here with darker red. We can create variations of lighter red too with this. So I'm going to take that same red and black color that we had earlier, add a little bit of white to it. It's going to create this kind of pretty light mauve color almost. But this is going to lighten up some of that. So I like to put my lighter color leaves towards the top, like where the sun would be hitting the lighter parts. So it wouldn't just be kind of scattered all over. It would just be mostly on the edgings. And then you can create like a little group of lighter colors in the middle of some area, and it kind of gives some depth into your tree, gives it a little bit of three-dimensional look without it being too complex. And then I am actually going to go in and add some more branches. You don't have to do this, but sometimes after we do the fall, the leaves, we can go back and we can add branches that are in front of the leaves. So we can go in here. It works better when the paint is dry. So you can have some of these black branches overlap some of the yellow aspen leaves we did earlier. You can leave gaps. So it gives you different variations of layering in your tree. I'm just doing this with the number 4 round brush in black. I loosen that black a little bit just to kind of thin it out. And these are very, very thin lines. And next I'm just going to rinse and go back and add more leaves to the trees using the colors. I'll do more red. I'll add more yellow onto the aspen tree. Maybe some more red. Maybe there's some leaves that look like they're falling, so they don't have to be attached to any of the branches. And then more yellow for the aspen. And then next I am going to add a little baby aspen popping up over here on the left. So this one's just going to be white, very, very close, almost just attached to the original tree. And then a few branches. And then of course this one will get to have pops of yellow leaves as well. So we can do the little black markings and some black branches. And this one also gets little yellow rounded leaves, so it was an opportunity to have a lower tree in the painting to add some pops of bright yellow in the middle area overlapping the lake. Get some white and add white over the yellow. The rest of this painting really is just final touch-ups and detail work. I am going to actually go back in the lake with some pure white, and I'm just going to do some very loose white lines in the water. We kind of did this earlier when we added our white layer over our blue, but I'm going to do some thin horizontal lines, and these lines are smaller in the back and longer towards the bottom, and you can do this all throughout your lake or leave it alone. If you like the way your lake looks, you don't have to add these white water lines. The last final touch up I'm going to do is add yellow to my grass layer in the background. It's just going to kind of add a light golden glow back there. So I grabbed white and I mixed white with yellow just now. And I'm just taking my brush, same technique as what we did earlier with the green, but now with the yellow, and I'm just layering it over that light green layer we did earlier, but not trying to overpower it. So it's just another layer on top of a darker layer that was added there before. A little bit more white. We don't want to use pure white for it because we don't want white grass, but little bits of white in there that mixes with that color, gives it that glow. And you can decide if you want to add more leaves on the ground or more leaves on the tree. I'm going to go in with pops of red and just do little dabs of red and orange in there. And this is the conclusion of our autumn lakeside painting. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.